everyone, this is Lulu from As You Wish Pottery, and in this video we'll be recreating this super cute Good Vibes rainbow platter. Grab all your supplies and let's get started. Alrighty, so we're going to begin by using a pencil to trace the image on the lesson plan onto some tissue paper. Once you're done, you're going to set that tissue paper sheet on the middle of your platter and you're going to retrace all your lines using a Sharpie marker. Remember to place the clouds underneath the rainbow, and once you're done, we can begin painting. Alrighty, so we're going to begin by painting the first arch. This one is marked with a number 1, and we're going to be painting it using the Pumpkin Pie Fun Writer if you're in the studio. If you're at home and you took this project to go, you could use the detail brush to paint that same arch using 1 to 2 coats of pumpkin pie. Keep in mind though that if you are using the Fun Writer and you feel more comfortable using the detail brush, feel free to use it. It's really up to you and whatever you feel the most comfortable. When I'm using the Fun Writer, I make sure that I squeeze my outlines first. So I create an outline with the Fun Writer first and then I go in and I fill it in. In this project, I'm using just little lines. So I'm making sure that the tip of my Fun Writer is always clean so that way I'm not dragging paint around. And again, I start off with creating a shape. Then I go in and fill it in however feels the most comfortable. Sometimes some little lines and dashes work. Sometimes I just want to pull the whole surface. So it's really however you feel the most comfortable and whatever's going to get you the best arch. Next, we're going to rinse off the detail brush if you used it to paint the pumpkin pie arch. And we're going to rinse the brush and we're going to use that same brush to paint the second arch. It's labeled with a number 2 and we're going to do 2 coats of peachy keen on there. And keep in mind that there's an arch line that sits above this peach line. We will paint this later. This is just for us to know that something is going to go on there later. So as I'm completing my arch, you can see that there's a line that I traced that's in between the pumpkin pie and the peachy keen line. You should have a similar line, letting you know that we will do something on this surface later. Something I wanted to share here is that your arches may change size as you're painting them, and I just want you to know that that's totally okay. It tends to happen when you're creating a shape like an arch, something that's not a circle, not a square, but it's a kind of in between of both, right? It has these long ends but also curves at the top, so the shape kind of gets tricky sometimes, so don't feel discouraged if your lines get a little thicker. That's totally okay. So with the same brush and the same peachy keen color, we're going to paint the arch above the pumpkin pie arch. This one doesn't have a number, but it sits right above the pumpkin pie one, so you'll be able to tell right away. So we're doing 2 coats on this and then we'll move on to the next arch. Next, we're going to rinse off our detail brush and we're going to use this brush or the small brush to paint the third arch marked with a number 3 using 1 to 2 coats of Simply Cinnamon. Now we're going to be using the detail brush to paint the scallops over the peach arch with 1 to 2 coats of Simply Cinnamon. Alrighty, so now we're going to rinse off our detail brush one more time, and we're going to use it to paint the dash rays over the rainbow with 1 to 2 coats of pumpkin pie. Keep in mind, these don't have to be perfect. They're just little rays emanating from the rainbow towards the edge of the platter. With the Fun Writer, if you're in the studio, or the detail brush, if you're painting this at home, paint the laurel arch in between the pumpkin pie and peach arches with Nantucket Blue. So you can use the sample as guide, or you can just follow along as you see here. I start off with creating the line, and then I start adding all the little laurels and all the little leaves as I'm going. Note that I just create kind of like an oval, and then I go over that oval one more time. That's how I make my little laurels or loopies. And then I also rotate my piece as I'm working on it, just because I find it more comfortable to do the little flowers towards me. Sometimes it's easier to do them towards me, sometimes it's easier to do them towards or away from me. So you just have to find whichever position you feel the most comfortable in, and as you're going along, make sure to adjust that line that connects all of them, and so that way your line is all smooth all the way around. Alrighty, so once done, I'm going to use the same Fun Writer or brush to paint a thin arch in between the peachy and Simply Cinnamon arches, and I'm still using my Nantucket color, and once I'm done creating that thinner arch, I will then go in and paint my clouds. And with the clouds, it's the same kind of concept. I'm just doing some messy shapes, and then I'm filling in some areas and leaving some areas gappy. So as you see, I'm working on my arch here. This is going to be a thinner line, so I'm going carefully around this area, and then once I'm done, I'll move on to the clouds. Alrighty, so here I'm about to start working on my clouds, and I just wanted to show you guys pretty much what I'm doing as I'm doing it. So I'm just creating the shape of my cloud first, then I go in and I fill in some sections and I leave gaps in others. I just start off with the easiest shapes I can create, so I start with circles and things like that, and then I go in and fill in the rest. Alrighty, so next I'm going to do some dots on the Simply Cinnamon arch using Peach Keen. I'm using the back of my small brush, and I'm just painting a bunch of random dots all over the place, that's all. So next we're going to move on to the lettering in the center of the platter. So for this, I'm using my Black Lab fun writer, and I'm going carefully over my letters one by one. If you're using a detail brush, that's totally okay. Just be mindful of how much paint you're putting on your brush. So maintain your brush not too loaded, just to ensure that you get some really nice lines. And remember to start up thin and then thicken up your lines as you're going. If you're using the fun writer, it's all about how much pressure you're adding. So make sure that you have a consistent pressure on your fun writer bottle, so that your thumb is constantly pressing the center of the bottle and that it's at a good angle so the paint starts flowing as it should. If it feels like you're struggling too much, like your hand is squeezing too hard, maybe shake up that bottle really well, maybe pour a little bit more paint back in there and get it to loosen up. It should be a really easy flow of paint as you're going along each letter. Alrighty, so now I'm going to be using the detail brush one more time, but this time I'm painting the outlines on the larger arches and the clouds using Black Lab. I would highly suggest that you look at the sample so that we have an idea on what lines I'm painting. You can also just keep an eye here and see the ones I painted and then paint them your own. If you wanted to change it up and outline some and not outline others, or not outline them, that is really up to you, and more power to you. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do, go for it. If not, you can just watch me doing it here, or you can look at the sample and kind of follow along from there. To note when you're doing anything with your detail brush is to not overload your brush. Make sure that your brush has enough paint that you can carry all the way through with whatever you're doing. I try to remind myself that I can always make something thicker, so I just want to start off with a nice thinner line and then work from there, thicken it up as I go. So that means that I'm constantly reloading my brush, but also making sure that I'm not picking up too much paint. You never want your brush to splatter or spit at you, or not even spit, just like have paint drop. You don't want that, so let's try to avoid that by making sure that we're aware of how much paint we're putting on our brushes. I also like to add a couple droplets of water to my Black Lab paint whenever I'm doing something intricate like this. It just helps me ensure that the consistency of the paint is thin enough that I can drag it as I should. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, that's totally okay, and if you want to try it out, I suggest you just add a couple droplets of water to your paint, stir that up really well, and maybe practice on your table or practice on a piece of paper and see how much pressure you need holding the brush, and if your paint is at a good consistency or if it's too runny. So take your time little by little, and work your lines one line at a time and make them good as you're going. Here I'm going to start outlining my clouds, and something I wanted to note, as you saw when I was outlining all the other lines, is that I'd like to rotate my piece just so I can take whatever is the most comfortable position that I can find, whatever I can find where my hand doesn't have to do a lot of work. I will try to always do that. That way I get the best line. So I suggest that you kind of get familiar with rotating your piece. Try to get at things at a different angle, see if that's easier for you and if it's better for your lines. Righty, so lastly, we're just gonna paint dots on the rim using Q-tips and black lab. So this process is fairly easy and simple to do. All you gotta do is dip your Q-tip in some paint and then paint a couple dots. I try to do 2 to 3 dots at most before I dip my brush or my Q-tip back in. So this just helps ensure that all my blobs are the same size, so all the circles are the same. And note that if you need to grab another Q-tip, that might be a possibility if it gets too wet. But then once you're done, your piece will be ready to be signed and fired. Alright, so here's a little close-up of our finished product. It's going to get really bright and colorful once it gets fired. All those lines are going to show up really nice. I hope you had fun painting with me today. Have a great day and bye-bye.